Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. This podcast contains frank discussions about the body, sexuality, and occasionally uses swear words, which may not be appropriate for people under the age of 18. This podcast also uses facts, statistics, and mathematics, which may not be appropriate for liberal arts majors. And this podcast relies on science and reality, which may not be appropriate for evangelicals. Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. You are here with your host, Auntie Vice, and it's good to be back. We are deep in the holiday season, so happy holidays to whichever holiday you are celebrating. Today, I had a listener and somebody who reached out to me when I taught at DomCon in LA this year and said, I just took the most amazing class in DomCon NOLA. You've got to connect with DocDomina. And so I did a dive into her work, and holy smoke, we have so much in common. And she does some really, really cool stuff. So she is a professional dominatrix. She's currently accepting fitness subs. She teaches, she does community work, she runs a dungeon. She knows all sorts of stuff. She's a clinical psychologist. She's amazing, professional weightlifter. We're going to get into all of that. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy holidays. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here and being so welcoming and kind. I am going to give a quick addendum note.
Okay.
I am a part of the Atlanta dungeon under Mistress UV. So shout out to her. But she is mother of the dungeon and welcome me in. So that was my first shameless plug. But yes,
Perfect.
love everything you're about, and I'm super excited for us to chat and chop it up and go over all the fun kinky things.
So I wanted to start. You actually have a regular career outside of being a professional dom, which is a little different than some of the other pros I've had on the show. So let's just start talking about how'd you go from being this super educated, you got the degrees, you went to college and you got the big D, and now you also work in as a dominatrix. How'd that happen?
I'm concision is not always my friend. So I, at base, have always probably had some internal tendencies that were a little left of quote unquote vanilla. And then over the course of working on my doctorate and getting into bodybuilding, I began to lean in a little bit more into my joy of sharps, oddly enough. So I got my Domme start with needles on accident because of bodybuilding and being paid to inject bodybuilders, and then being oh, you like this a lot more than the average person I pay to do this. And I'm oh, I didn't know everyone doesn't have fun doing this. And so fast forward, connected with some kinkier individuals who weren't necessarily out, but they taught me things, kind of shared more about what kink is, what community is. Earlier stages of life, I definitely toyed in the breath play, the impact, the I shouldn't say the base. As we go down the pro rabbit holes, we're yeah, I don't know, the simple vanilla stuff that's not even close to vanilla, but I'm yeah, I got my start there. And then because of competing, and at that point, I was on some of the sites and stuff, and just word of mouth. Word of mouth is always our friend, sometimes our foe, but usually our friend. Had individuals that would just be oh my gosh, can you do X, Y, and Z to me? Or oh, I want to worship your muscles. And initially I was what does this even mean? What do you, what? Who are you? And they eventually like I got oversaturated to an extent. And like in talking to my like kinkier leaning competitor friends, they shared more about like the like gay queer side of muscle worship, for example, and like what, what that means. And then other parts of the scene. And so at face value, I was just like, well, I mean, I'm getting paid to do things that like I like, and like people are asking me to do things that like inherently don't really mean anything to me. So like I reciprocity. And started charging because I was like, this is logical because Doc kind of has money kink, which came into play a little bit later. But yeah, the other component is, while I am not entirely asexual, I am definitely asexual leaning with some like sapio sprinklings. And so like I literally just would be like, I don't see the point of like having engagement or interaction with people. Like there's literally I feel nothing. So like I don't this is literally work. And then you have the guys that are like, please peg me. And I'm like, penetrative sex in any direction. Again, like, I'm like, you're a bottom. And that got me more into the Dom explicit end of things, and really starting to conceptualize myself in that way, because I was like, okay, things I like I like telling people what to do. I liked having the more like deferred subs, so traditionally mask, like put together, not like pleading, like desperate. Like I liked having those individuals and like having kind of a more holistic experience. And then like eventually started learning more and digging more and getting more mentorship and being like, oh, okay, because they're more dynamic leaning and they're authentically subs and, they're not trying to top from the bottom. Like, and so going through those different life phases simultaneously while going through my doctorate. And then once I like wrapped the doctorate, I was like, okay, like this feeds me. And also seeing a recurring theme of people who are like, oh, I'm a sub. And I'm like, I'm a nerd. So I'd like tried studying any and everything I could about BDSM, about kink, about the different layers. So like E&M, poly, the different variations, and started integrating that into my psych work. And so I was doing work with like, forensic end of things and quote unquote sexually violent predators and like working with rehabilitation programs and such, and like seeing the trends of like isolation and identity withholding and like stigma and the ways that those can intersect with problems down the line, and then seeing how that impacts community. I was like, okay, well, like I can like behind the scenes kind of do work that like directly connects with what I'm doing outside, in more subdued manners, because at that point I could not be out at all. I started seeing ways that I could intersect things. And then on the psych end, I was also doing institutional restructuring and like helping with DEI work. And like, this was like post 2020 and onward too. And so like really helping individuals come to terms with like, no, like discriminatory practices in the brain are literally efficient. Like it's how our mind works. Like it discriminates. It's the action, and what we do with it is what matters. And so like trying to normalize things that people can sometimes have like adverse reactions to was already one hat. And then I realized I was starting to do that in the kink end. And like I started having subs that, I'm like, oh, okay, like you're anxious and that's why you're not listening to me properly, or like you enjoy the sensation of being left alone or breath play because like the pressure weighted blanket. Like, time to literally check out and feel that you're still being watched, safe and secure. Like, so going through that like ideology, and I, again, like I said, concision, not my friend, I apologize. But like going through those tandem trajectories, I was like, okay, like these are passion points. And then like teaching people like this is a sub versus a bottom. I am a sadist. I like pain. The reason I cannot have a dynamic with someone who is only a bottom is because at the end of the day, like I can just get paid to give you what you want in this moment. And then I don't have to like demand that you do check-ins and like try and tailor your aesthetic to what I actually find pleasing. Like I don't have to do these things. It can just literally be like a kind interaction, and like you pay and I, care about your well-being, and then like we see each other again later, just like you go to your barber or your hairdresser or whatever. Like, it doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means we don't have to talk 24/7. And so, like, going through that, I was like, oh, wait, like, even knowing these differentiations is not something that people can discuss. And so starting to tell people like, hey, we don't have the session. Like we can literally consult on like what BDSM kink is and what you're actually looking for, like how you find a partner that actually fits. And so again, working from the psych work end and just really fusing the different passion points. And so now, and I love psychological play. Like I love mind fuckery. I love using knowledge of like how the brain cross wires and thresholds. Like I love applying that in play. And so like I started teaching on that. And so now fast forward, I've been building the private practice end of things and like working from a consultation lens. So that way I can be out. So that way I can do more front facing teaching. That way, I can serve the community. Cause at the end of the day, that was like a passion point for any hat I've been wearing. And so now I have the opportunity to do that. Thank you for listening to that like 10-hour rant.
I love it because there's so much there and there's just so many cool points to touch on. So I'm going to try and kind of keep it in order of the stories, but we'll go wherever. My listeners are used to tangential interviews. We're good with that. So you were doing bodybuilding when you get into grad school. And I say grad school is the most masochistic thing you can do.
Just a little bit.
Oh my God. My dissertation advisor was like the worst Dom ever. Because like, yeah, you just fucking nothing is satisfactory. You go back and you repeat the same thing 1,000 times before it's okay.
Over and over and over.
Somebody said it's way worse than pregnancy because at least with pregnancy you're done with it in 9 months and you're not told to go back and redo the first trimester.
Legit. So legit. Oh my gosh, yes.
So you're going through grad school, you're also doing bodybuilding. Both of these take an amazing amount of discipline. Have you always been that disciplined in getting stuff done and moving forward?
So Doc is a little bit neurotic. I may have some OCPD proclivities. And I just will be like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, what do I need to do to get it done? And so, like, it's not even like, oh, you need to achieve this. It's like in my brain, I'm like, I think this is feasible, or I know that I need this to happen to make other things happen in my life. And that is pretty much how I have functioned. And then I didn't realize until later in life that that's not just like everyone's brain go to. And like for the psychology, I started with sports psychology. So my master's is in sport and exercise psychology. And part of that was because I used to run track and I would get profusely anxious and like I did not accept losing. Like I can basically the first time I lost was going to state and I cried for like a day over that. And like that was the amount of internal pressure I put on myself. But fast forward, I got into working in athletics and then learned about sports psychology and got my master's in sports psych, but still would refuse to work out. Other side note, so I like didn't work out basically until I started going to the gym at the beginning of my doctorate. Just to make myself more normal sounding. But yeah, so I basically I was like, oh, okay, like sports psychology, athletics, this makes sense. Cool, let's get a master's. And I like moved to like a state I had zero connection to and like knew no one. But I was like, I like their sport exercise program and I like the research that they put out and I like their athletic department. So I guess I'm moving there and like moved there because I got in. And then for my doctorate, I was like, well, I guess so that was in the Bay Area. So I was like, all right, well, I guess if I get into this program, then I'm moving cross country and like, let's see what that's like. And got into the program, moved cross country, got into the kink scene. But going back to the bodybuilding, there's a young woman in my doc program who was also from the South. And so we kind of vibed. And she was like, hey, if you ever want to go to the gym with me, instead of just like hanging out at Starbucks to avoid traffic, like feel free. And so I did. And I was like, oh, okay, I kind of like this. And so it became something that I could detach and, just like ground with post classes or like once I ended up with a caseload and like working, in different populations with clients, like that just became a part of my routine. And so going back to the OCPD and neuroticism and anxiety management, like that helped ground me. And then going through grad school, like I would basically time the shows that I wanted to do with like end of quarters. So like I would be going through peak week at times, which is like death week for bodybuilders sometimes. I would go through that as close as possible to like midterms and finals, because then I would be like, nothing's really that bad. Like, like you get through this studying, or like study during your cardio and then lift and then like bust out this paper, and then like at the end of the week you're going to be on stage and then like celebrate with this like awesome cheat meal and like wine. I don't know, but like, so I basically trained my brain to just accept like trophy. Like I was just like, let's double down on the ways we can suffer. Like, and then like, yay, that will make you really happy at the end of it. And like, that's how I got through grad school. So yeah, that's my plug. Like, if you want to get a doctorate, like find deep masochistic ways to torment yourself, and then you'll come out on top.
It is helpful. It is helpful. So when you move from track and field to bodybuilding, that's a very different style of body. And as a competitive bodybuilder, you are on stage very scantily dressed and
Mhm,
people are judging your body. Was that
mhm.
always a comfortable place for you?
Um, honestly, like, so part of that like whole start was I just would go to the gym, and basically the friend like kind of backdoor slid in like a prep, because eventually she was like, hey, let's toy with your diet. And I was like, okay, like why not? Because again, like distraction from classes. I'm like, this sounds fun. Like, yeah. And then she was like, oh, do you want to learn like posing? And I was like, sure. And then she's like, how do you feel about doing a show? And I was like, that sounds like a terrible idea. And she's like, no, no, no. Like, we'll do a small one. Like, let's pick a small one for you. And so, like, on the front end, I was like, oh my gosh, like, oh no. But I did this like small natural show, and like everything about it was just like fun. Like, I mean, it was strange. Like, I was literally getting glazed, and like literally Pam cooking spray is what they use for the glaze.
Mhm.
Like, it was like at this like little high school gym. Like, like subsequent shows looked very different, but the experience of like peaking and like getting the spray tan, like all of it was just, I mean, I loved it. And so like by the time you get to stage day, because of everything that's gone to that point, and then because, it's almost like dungeon parties or whatever, where it's like, oh wait, like nobody here really cares that much about like what you look like. Now, eventually I learned like in the audience, yeah, there are people that are fetishizing you. And like, yeah, probably some of the judges and some, like everybody's got kinks, everyone's got fetishes. And so you're gonna find ways to connect with them as much as you can in day-to-day life. So that's a layer. But the experience of going on stage, the experience of being scantily clad is like so normalized. And like there's also just levels of pure depletion and exhaustion that like the construct of thinking sexually or like from an objectification standpoint is so absent. And then it's like, yeah, everybody strips, you get like spray tan. I could care less if like one of the open men's bodybuilders is getting spray tan butt naked in the tent right next to me, because like we're all in this together and like none of us really care. And then standing on stage, like in order to make it in bodybuilding, like you have to have intrinsic motivation. You have to know like that you're just trying to be your best, because like now as a pro, like I'm competing with Olympians. Like literally, like I did my pro debut, and the woman next to me has consistently gotten second in our division in Olympia for years. And that's who I was standing next to in my pro debut. So like being like, oh no, like I need to win in order to feel fulfilled would be absurd. You do way too much suffering to only do it for like a win and like, a little bit of money or like a little like plastic trophy or medal. Um, and so being judged is, it's like, okay, what are the judges going to say? But it's definitely like okay, do I like my stage photos more? Like, do I see development in areas that I was focused on? Like, do they give me better feedback than the last time? And so the construct of even being judged, I guess, is a bit different, because it's like, yeah, that's just part of it. But like, like the only people that matter are like myself and I guess the like the judging panel, and like they're just doing their job. So it's not like they're being like negative judgy. It's literally what I signed up for.
You talk about, that there may be some people fetishizing you. Obviously, you're on FetLife, you're on some of these other sites where fetishization of the body is part of some people's kinks.
Hmm.
So you have multiple intersecting identities where people would fetishize you as a Black woman, as a bodybuilder, all of that. Uh,
Hmm.
how is it being this visible? And you've got some phenomenal photos out there.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you. Thank you.
being this visible and having strangers approach you for all sorts of different interactions. I mean, what has been your experience there?
I mean, a wide gamut, as many of us
Uh-huh.
know. And so front end, I joined Fat, for example, because I was like, oh my gosh, it's like kinky Facebook. Like, yay, I'm finally able to like learn, like lifelong learner brain that initially got activated because it was just like, oh my gosh, like, yay, like I can see things, like there are these tags, like this is beautiful. And then, that which is Fat gave me the full gamut experience. Um, which I'm grateful for because that really helped me like hone in on components of the components. Because again, I would get people consistently asking me for things, and going back to the Black woman component, like being fetishized for race, where I would have this like internal reaction, and I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like, oh, like that was the first time I realized, like, no, they are. This is not them viewing you as a whole person. They are literally treating you as a fetish. They are not seeing you as a whole human. They are seeing you as a part. And so I actually started on the front end of my fet. I would like say, I was a little less like concrete. And I was just like, oh, like don't approach unless you have intellectual capital. But like that hinges on people actually understanding that capital has to be something that I find valuable. So sending me an
Mhm.
article about coding to pretend that you're smart is not intellectual capital for me. So no, fuck you, pay me, or like leave me alone. And I would get guys that are like, oh, I want to serve a beautiful Black goddess mistress. And like, I was like, okay, cool. So like studying it, I was like, well, this is monetizing. So like, yeah, like they shouldn't have free access because this is not an individual that I will ever align with. And this was when I was still like more lifestyle leaning. And so I was like, oh, okay, like dynamic checklist. Like, oh, okay, they're not dynamic oriented, but they want these things. All right, so you can book a session. And then that also helped me tailor. Basically, I have this like document that I send to people if they do say that they want to serve me or they want a dynamic. And like out the gates, I was like, oh, right, because this like race play component keeps popping up. And I'm like, that is my limit. Like I will do a lot of shit. But the race play is not something because I'm like, like no, like that feeds me in no way. Um, but I will flip it on its head. And when people decide that they're like, no, 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 like I still want to be attached to you, like like if I take anyone into consideration to be considered for any connection, like I have them read DEI literature. I have them fill in the addressing model from Hayes, looking at their different identities and ways that power and privilege come into play. And so like I started developing from that lens because I was like, no, I don't like only being perceived for like this body part or my skin tone because that seems counterproductive to me literally being the top and the dom. Like, no, like you serve me, you learn me, you worship me. This formula is not that. And so, like, finding workarounds, finding ways where I'm like, oh, okay, again, education, like utilizing the privileged space that I have now as a result of this to inform. And then, like, I did start, you know, shutting down the hatches, so to speak, in terms of access because I did realize, like, oh, wait, like, this is strange. I'm getting like a lot of people coming to me. And like, I also don't like time wait. I mean, I abhor time wasting, but like, I don't like frivolous conversation. So, like, dude sending me like, oh, well, how would you like me to serve you eventually? Or like, literally sending a 5-page, I'm sure copy pasted like novel on the shit that they want me or insert whatever Dom to do to them. I'm like, no, that is time. time is energy. So that equals money. So like I started saying, like, if you want to speak to me, if you want to message me, even if you want to go out to coffee and you're coming from this venue, like I need to get some type of reciprocity. And you're already showing me that it's not going to be intellectual capital. So like I like I like money. Like holdover from broke grad student days. And means of growing up. I'm like, this is practical. This makes this logical to give you my energy. And also going to insert a little plug in terms of the emotional labor of Black women, because on the front end, I was definitely taking it upon myself to be like, oh, okay, like, well, these are the intersections of like how identities come into play in dynamics. And like, this is why this is not okay. Like, you sending me a picture after I've been keeping you under consideration for 6 months now, like, you finally being like, oh, can I gift you a fucking unitard with a white dick on it? Like, reasons that I'm probably going to have a reaction to that after I have literally helped you like work with your business, manage your breathing and somatic work, and like get your shit together and give you like labels to identify with in this community. Like, no, that's not okay. So like working from those different angles has been like how I've been able to manage um being perceived in a very like mono lens at times, because it's like, okay, well, you can start from that point, but I'm still going to try and backdoor educate you in the community at least a little bit.
So let's talk about some of that emotional labor. One of the best things I saw somebody point out that we should consider people gold diggers when there are these dudes coming to women and asking them to do all of this emotional labor to make them and their worlds possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when did you start valuing your own emotional labor?
So front end work, like having to do the clinical work and the therapeutic work while working on the doctorate. And like, you like talk to enough people about what they should be doing. It's like, hmm. And then you go to your own therapy sessions and you're like, okay. And so that, like functioning from a space of imposter syndrome in academia, like realizing that like I was TAing and like teaching people in classes like, oh, okay, like, well, this is like how you can connect with this marginalized population, or like, oh, like all Black people are not a monolith. So like just because it's a Black clinician doesn't mean it's best fit. Like actually get to know the client and don't assume that their background is this and their feelings are this just because of this one thing. And so I was having those conversations over and over and over again, and like going through the academia, that's a whole different conversation. But going through layers of being an advocate for clients at times, because I've worked in like prison populations, juvenile halls, state hospitals, all types of areas where I was one of the only people working there that mirrored a lot of the client base, and being very deliberate and mindful of the fact that at the end of the day, I may have less privilege than everyone working there, but I still have more privilege than the clients, and my obligation is to the clients. So like I'm probably gonna get fucked here and there, but like I'm doing this work because I want to actually help people. And so like functioning from that lens, but keep like still being met with like brick walls, and then also having people be like, oh, can you create this PowerPoint? Oh, can you talk to this person? Oh, can you do this? Oh, would you use this book or this book? And being like, I am getting paid the exact same amount or less than some of these people, and taking on these tasks because like, oh yay, it'll look good, and maybe one day they'll value me. And being like, no, like that's, that it's deeper than that. And again, like 2020, very formative, because like in 2018 to 2019, I was helping teach courses on DEI and like basically rapport building across identities. And like the amount of extra labor that myself and another woman in my program were doing was fascinating. And I remember talking about like, hey, Ahmaud Arbery just happened, emailing professors in the program when I saw what happened with George Floyd, and being like, we need to talk to the students about this. Like, we need to dedicate time. And this was before it blew up. And the professors being like, well, like at the end of the day, like we may not have time to discuss such things. And now to this day, at the bottom of their emails, oh, Black Lives Matter, X, Y, Z.
Mhm.
And so to me, going through that And, literally the emotional labor of those experiences, I started to withdraw and be like, no, what do you need in order to do this? And so then having people be like, well, once I got more into the deep work, like, oh, okay, well, can you run this group or can you run this onboarding for this institution? Well, yeah, but like I'm gonna need extra hours for that. Like, and starting to self-advocate there. And then going through the kink trajectory, being like, oh, you know what? This feels very similar. Like thematically, intellectually, emotionally, I know this. And then being like, well, control the controllables. What do I need? Because at the end of the day, it's coming from a space of wanting to be of assistance, of wanting to serve the community. But like, that doesn't mean you should burn yourself out before like you've even done anything. So you can't help anyone. Like, what do you need? And like, also, how do you check for if people are willing to receive the information? Because then a little emotional labor is worth it because at least they're trying and you're not beating your head against a brick wall. Like their stage of change, they're at least in this contemplation, maybe action stage. Um, Again, rambling, but hopefully,
No, it actually provides a great transition because as you're talking about doing the DEI work and the education in other institutions, in 2020, white people in kink discovered, there's racism, like the
mm,
rest of them, the
mm,
rest of the world. Like,
yeah,
oh, wait, there's a thing here.
yeah,
Which,
yeah.
and it's been, as somebody who's been in this world for over 3 decades, it's been interesting to see how it's evolved because I was writing about interracial relationships and power, structural power differences in kink, long before George Floyd and all that. And people were like, no, we don't want to talk about it. That's not a thing. Um, and now that we are 4 years out, we're also seeing people trail off and be like, well, we did the work and now it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we put up a couple of posters with, black faces on it, so our space is welcoming. Let's
Yep.
talk about the reality of what really needs to happen. So you've experienced kink in lots of different places. You tour with the kink world. Um, how has our DEI work gone from your experience, and where are you feeling the most comfortable and the least comfortable as you tour around working in kink?
So I would say, in terms of, because there's a few different layers that have like come to the forefront over time. Like the amount of, you know, BIPOC bodies and Black bodies that I can more readily connect with being in Atlanta, like it's an easy access point. Now, the integration and like the bridge between communities is where things get tricky. Um, and then conversely, I say Atlanta because that's where I'm at present. And so some people may be like, oh, okay, so yeah, like, of course it's Atlanta. But in jumping around, it's a theme. Um, and so being in California, like in the Bay Area, like if we look at the history of queerness and like, queerness, also spent a good amount of time in New York and connections with New York and like the construct of race and the gay community and the history there, like, the construct of race and how people frame things and words versus actions is like nothing new under the sun. Just like you were saying in terms of what you were touching on early on and how
Mhm.
people are like, well, that's not here or like that's not now. And I think that has been a redundant experience. Now, I will say that certain communities, I think by virtue of the fact that kink and BDSM has more space. So like in SoCal, because there is such a richness of, just like kink opportunities and kink community and like being able to gather in public spaces. And so like you can see more of a sliding scale of experience. And like, so it's like, okay, new people, period, because they're like, oh, this seems cool. So it's just like you have a bunch of numbers. And so you're going to get a little bit more diversity. Whereas when it's like, hey, there's not necessarily a huge array of opportunities for people to go to kink community spaces. And so these events are like in private residence, and that's really what the community is depending on. Of course, human nature, access, like all of these things are going to start coming into play. And so, having spaces in the country where it's like there is a thriving and rich like club and, just like outright years of lineage group like group scene. So like having more years under their belts and having just more consistent events. I think that that has informed the lay of the land, where from in a general ecosystem, I think there's more like integration and cross communication and like overlap. Whereas when that isn't the case, it is very much like, well, we need this space and like this space is ours because these are the people we know and we feel safe with. And so then we don't know what we don't know. People aren't learning from each other. And so like having conversations about like how different skin tones are gonna react and like this is how you play with partners of different backgrounds, or like this individual is undergoing HRT and HRT is going to impact how their skin reacts to X, Y, and Z. Like, even having the opportunity for that type of dialogue doesn't come to people's minds because they're like, well, this isn't relevant. And so, like, if you ask them at face value, it's like, oh, yeah, no, we're welcoming. Like, I'd love to be around these people. But like you said, like having a picture versus like doing the work are two different things. And then if you don't even know that there's work to be done, it's like the schism just further and further occurs. And so, like, going to different parts of the country, again, like New York, I'm actually up here right now. Um, you just have a high concentration of people and an overall perspective on that which is kink and that which is BDSM. And, you've got more people that are just going to kind of land in the same place. And then it's like, oh, okay, because I've got more of an opportunity to be with someone of this identity, like I've got them as a resource, but also I'm more inclined to learn a little bit more about them as a whole human because I know that I don't know about them. And I know that I'm probably going to see them again. And so that would probably be the overarching thing. And then like final note, like the international scene, again, like access and familiarity, like uh the Euro, and of course everything's gonna be regionally and individual specific. But I will say, like, in terms of openness to just being like, how can I serve you? What would you like as a sub? Like when I go to like the Mediterranean region, Eastern Europe, like it's just a different mindset of just like it's not like what can I get from you, or it's not like, oh, you're American. Like it's like sometimes race will come up because they're just like we just don't have that many black people here. And on top of that, like you're a black so like it's more a curiosity space, not the explicit like, oh, I've always wanted a black dom. It's like literally curiosity, like tell me more, like what do you need? Like that has been an experience more abroad that I have been very grateful for. Yes, but again, access and the construct of sexuality and openness to the sexuality umbrella is a little different. So, yeah.
And yeah, when I've been over in Europe and teaching, it's very different by country, by,
Yeah.
the demographic makeups. Yeah, it makes a difference. The one that came up with me that I was surprised, I was in England this summer and everybody's like, you're American. How do you deal with healthcare? Like, it's just
Yes. The world is very concerned for us.
they're deep. They're like, how are you like accessing anything at this point?
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. That's why I'm here right now. Yeah.
We are recording this a week before the election. So you you have so many intersecting identities that could be deeply impacted by the
Yeah,
outcome in 7 days. What are your
yeah,
feels towards the whole political thing right now? Because you are based in America, you work
yes,
in the sex work industry, you are a Black woman, you are in mental health care.
yes.
Give me your hot political take.
Um, well, the hottest take is probably that Doc is an anarchist at this life stage. Which is a whole nother conversation. So a part of me is just like, guys, let's all, let just I accept whatever the outcome is, but if we all make one final establishment move, signing paperwork saying that, just like burn it all, like we're all fine with that. Like I wholeheartedly consent. Like it's fine if it's the Hunger Games. Like if we're all like that's just what it is. Yeah. So that's kind of my most authentic. Like
Mhm.
now with that being said, that does stem from the construct of like systemic and institutional just like shittiness base for America. So it's like either side has humans, like either side has its con. But conversely, like I can't see a pro on the orange side. Um, so there's that. And for better or worse, I'm like again, like you hit on, there is not an identity that I would feel safe with in certain outcomes. Like it already was very precarious. And I'm grateful because, it further allowed people to show me who they are and interpersonally. Like you couldn't tell. I'm like, no, like give me data and then I will do with it. Like I'll do a lot with it. And so like it gave that opportunity if we want to like positive reframe things. But like at core, like even like docs at sadist, docs unhinged, like day to day life, it's fine. But those that I love and care about so deeply in so many different vicinities and spheres of life, it's like there are no good outcomes with a given trajectory. Like I have worked in, you know, on the healthcare and like doing gender confirmation surgery paperwork and evals so that like paperwork could be cleared for individuals. Like I said, forensic systems and such. Like, I mean, there are people in every scope and sphere of life, whether it's like I've just worked with them or, like they are a part of my life, family, chosen family, etc. Like that's what upsets and terrifies me a little bit. Um, yeah, because like I said, I see nothing good there.
Yeah, as so I'm a queer woman. I'm in a conservative part of Northern California, and I host a monthly meetup for queer women. And we were all sitting around going, okay, so these are our former military women. These are the women who are farmers. These are the women who have like welding equipment. Like, if it all goes to shit, where do we gather to like live out the apocalypse? Because
Literally.
you know, literally, like if you're not making friendship groups by what they bring to the apocalypse, you're not doing it right now.
Uh, Thank you so much for naming that because literally the last 2 years I've been having conversations with like my like queer friends, my like kink friends, my BIPOC friends, and like we literally I'm like my like kink subby friends that like have like they're like military athletes, etc. They're like, no, it's fine. Like you can be like our Negan slash Rick, like whatever. Like you can be in charge. Like we'll have a compound. And I'm just like, yes. So we have farmers, we have artillery, we have healthcare, we have mental health care. Like we're gonna have like somatic breathing time for everyone, like that's that time every day. So our little commune is like well in the midst of the
Mhm.
apocalypse. Like it's gonna be fine. It'll actually be great. And we're gonna do this on an island. Somehow we're gonna get to an island, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's a real thing. Like the more
yeah.
marginal, my partner is Black former military, and we're like, we've had real discussions about, do we buy a gun? Because on the off chance the cops show up, we don't want to have a registered gun in the household. Because up here, that sets it up for a bad thing. But
Yeah.
our neighbors may require us to have one because, we got the rednecks with the Confederate flag across the street. So,
Yep. Yep. Like,
it's a thing. It's a thing.
yes, it is. It really, 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 really is. And it's unfortunate, but it is the reality.
What are you currently grateful for?
So much, which, may sound silly after that, but like, I mean, like, I'm grateful for all the individuals that I have connections with, whether it be like we speak consistently or, like it's been in passing facets of life.
Mhm.
I am grateful that I am able to do this work and that like I've had the privilege to enter spaces to be the only one to advocate for those that maybe wouldn't have a parallel perspective to advocate on their behalf. Like I'm grateful for the travel opportunities and like the fact as like silly as it may sound, like I'm grateful for community, especially in the kink community. But like I'm grateful for my dungeon and like UV because like it's a bunch of different individuals with different identities and one kind of core commonality, but like being able to like have events where it's like, yeah, okay, we can lean into this part of ourselves and like no judgment. And like, yeah, like we're gonna have people like serving us in their like sissy maid outfits, and then we're like, okay, like I'll see you next Wednesday at our next event, and like, and we're gonna go be other professionals, like, so like being able to have multitudes, like, and having internal space for those multitudes as well. I'm grateful for bodybuilding, good lord, and like not from the like, oh, like I want everyone to look at me in a sparkly bikini, but just like connecting with the ability to train and like being able to be in my body in a way that like feels safe and like progress oriented. Just I mean so many things. Like I also love like journaling. Like I'm grateful for journaling. I'm grateful for coffee. Like I'm grateful for all the things, but like gratitude journaling is literally a part of like every day. So like I'm grateful for mindfulness, like all the things. So like may I ask you the same thing? Is that weird?
No, not at all. Not at all. Right now, I'm really grateful for being in a space where I can be outdoors. I have a garden. I love my garden. I love working in it. I am grateful that my body is finally back to a functional place where I can start regaining strength. I was ill for almost a decade. And it's been in the last year that I've been able to go back to yoga and Pilates and movement, and I'm no longer using mobility aids, and that is huge for me. Um, and I'm really grateful for all of the really amazing folks out there. Like the more people I talk to, the richer the world is, which is why I absolutely love doing this show because it's an excuse to get somebody's undivided attention for an hour. And it's phenomenal. And I'm so grateful you came on the show. I could talk to you for hours. We haven't even touched on the forensic part, which is a whole nother thing I'm deeply fascinated by. But
Legit.
I do try to be respectful of your time. So if
Thank you.
listeners want to find you, if they want to submit to become a submissive, if they want to reach out and take one of your classes or hire you to teach, plug all the sites and socials.
Thank you. Yeah, like but cheesy side note first. Like I am
Uh-huh.
definitely grateful we connected. Like duh. Like I am super grateful and like grateful that like you said, like you've provided this space and time and energy. So many thanks to you. Thank you. And yes, now I'll do a shameless plug. Remember
Please.
my info. So Linktree, DocDomina, DocDomina, that has links to all the things. And so like all the things is anything from Instagram to OnlyFans and loyal fans and all of that, but also like my application, my website. The website has applications for if you want more fetish wrestling muscle worship or like BDSM Dom explicit hat, and then teaching. So like all of that is there. So basically, if you go to DocDomina in the link tree, that is the easiest way. Basically, if you look up DocDomina on pretty much any portal, you'll probably find me. But like the link tree, I know you'll find me. And my wish list is there because, like I said, I like gifts. Doc's love language is gifts giving. So yeah.
And you wanted to plug your upcoming ball in December at the Dungeon in Atlanta.
Yes. So in December, dates that I should probably have, but I know are posted on the website, but December the 18th, I believe, 14th, December 14th is going to be our Casino Royale holiday like extravaganza. We've got it posted on FET. I'll have the information on the website. But yeah, so we're gonna have a lovely little like James Bond-esque, like get dressed up, have a great time, like casino night. We just had a high protocol Victorian dinner to like bring in Halloween a few weeks ago. So it's always a fun time. And then like we have Kinked Atlanta, which is like one of the education initiatives. And like we're gonna have some upcoming basically parties where it's like DM'd by prodoms. So we teach the technique. We like check in on how people are engaging with the acts that we've discussed and like, you know, literally making it hands-on stations as opposed to like, okay, now go forth. It's like, no, like literally now do it with the pros. So we're gonna have that coming up in the beginning of next year. So yeah, all of that with the Atlanta Dungeon. If you're in the Atlanta area, please come through. If you see us at cons and stuff, because DomCon NOLA, DomCon LA, Frolicon, FetCon will definitely be all in all of those. But come say hello.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Listeners, we're going to have all of those links and more in the show notes, as you know. And thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Like, seriously.
Texas of the world. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fat Chicks on Top. Please like, subscribe, and review our podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. If we like your review, we may even read it online. This has been an Auntie Vice production. Producer and host, Rebecca Blanton. Audio production by Sharon Smith. Music by David Manga. And more music by Sharon Smith. For more information about Fat Chicks on Top, please visit our website for all things Fat Chicks at fatchicksontop.com.